when you were there at what I consider ground zero, what was the, tell me how you felt. What was the impact?
The impact, well, let me tell you that we have about 65 million displaced refugees in the world. Out of those 65 million, about 16 and a half are documented in UNHCR, which is the United Nations Human Commission of Relation. So the Refugee Committee. So there is a huge portion that is undocumented. There's a huge portion that are not being addressed. And truly watching that and going through the camps is heartbreaking, is heart-wrenching. It was not my first exposure to refugee camps, but it was my first exposure to an Iranian refugee camp where I saw my people. You would think as a professional, this should not make any difference, that everyone is equal, and it is equal. Your heart breaks when you see a child, regardless of color and creed. But for some reason,
It touches home.
You can't imagine how much more you can be in pain once they start talking to you in the language that is your first language, and they talk to you and they stick to you and they don't want to let go of your legs, or they don't want to let go of your hand, and the mothers tell you about their painful experiences, the abuses that's been happening. So all of what we saw, Princess Yasmine and I saw, absolutely took a toll on all of us, and it was not easy. It was not easy, and we continuously tried to find a way while we were there to address those needs. And time was not on our side. We didn't have enough time. By the time we would do the visits, we had to go back and then get ready for another set of visits and another set of, in my case, need assessments. I would meet with them, talk to them. And that gave me some sort of a foundation to work with. So when I came back to Los Angeles, I had gathered enough data to be able to say, okay, now this is what I'm facing. This is what's happening. Of course, to be honest with you, after the weeks of incredible depression and not wanting to get out of the bed, crying and being in the shower and crying so my husband wouldn't hear me, then it was the next stage, which was, okay, now we've got to do something. It was those raw data that I gathered from talking to people, from writing down, jotting down everywhere that I could on my phone, on pieces of paper, in the van, that I could put everything together and realize this is what I think. For lack of my limited knowledge, this is what I think we're facing. And first thing is first, we need to help these people by just providing support. Support was the first key. It was an understanding that no matter what, emotional, financial support has to be provided. So that's why Mental Health Beyond Borders was born. Called up colleagues, called up friends, people in the same field that were all Iranian descended, and they were all fluent in Farsi, because I could not. A lot of my students are Iranian, but I could not use them because they were born and raised in the United States. They couldn't communicate in Farsi, and all the refugees had just migrated from Iran. They didn't speak any other language than Farsi, so it was very difficult to find well-seasoned clinicians that spoke the language, understood the culture, but were trained and licensed. So that's how we began.
So what did you find to be like, if you had to put an order of like, this was the first need during your assessment, like what did you see that was absolutely dire needs? This is right now, red alert, this needs to be addressed. What did you find most commonly?
The first thing that it's quite impossible to walk into those camps and not see the level of hopelessness, the level of depression, the acute anxiety, and the complex PTSD that exists. Now, a lot of clinical words that I threw out there, but all of us are familiar with PTSD. We've heard it enough, whether it's because of the pandemic or since 9/11, there has been, that word has been used. So it's part of a global language. But the cases we see there is different than the normal PTSD that we see. These are chronic, complex ones. They start and they go on for years to come. When someone is a refugee, the first stage that they face is a pre-flight stage. When you and I decide to leave our country, no matter where that country is, there's a reason we're leaving it. We are either under oppression, or we are being, for any reason, we're being prosecuted for our political ideology, for artistic ability, for our gender preferences, for anything. We are being prosecuted. And the first part is the anxiety and the fear that starts. This is a couple of years even before deciding to migrate. So that's the primary. Then it gets to a point that you realize that, no, I have to leave. I cannot stay here anymore. This is the second phase, which we call it the flight of the refugee. And that is a very difficult phase. This is a phase that has displacement in it. This is a phase that when you and I are in that phase, even though sometimes refugees plan to leave their country, they come out with what they consider to be international monetary. Some bring dollars with them, some bring any other, euros to be able to carry them to the destination they're seeking. It doesn't really matter, because through the time that they're leaving the country of origin, they generally get robbed. There's general financial abuse that happens. Rarely the people, the coyotes that take them to the other side of the border, are the people that will allow them to get away with all of the finances that they have. So the abuse, sometimes financial, many times sexual in cases of women and children and young men. Many times, I would say physical, and naturally all the time verbal, happens in the flight stage. Now it gets complicated, because in some cases you even have to separate the child from the parent to be able to do this migration, because the child might be too young. Sometimes women give birth in that stage. So it has its own complications. Now, let's say you were lucky enough to get out of the border, come to the other side. What is waiting for you is not what they expect. It's not what they've seen in the Turkish movies, or in the American movies, or in whatever movies that they've seen. This is a whole new world out there. And that is where we got to see them. It's when they arrive. These are clandestine affairs. They arrive, they generally get into camps that are supported by United Nations. But the number of people that need to be addressed and need to be taken care of in these camps is probably 10 times the amount that the camp can provide for. So from the beginning, you have a scarcity of resources. From the beginning, you have a problem that the debilitating anxiety and in many cases, the survival guilt comes to visit you. Throughout the flight, you've lost a parent, you've lost a child, you've lost a partner. These are the things you've lost. And you have survived the flight. So now you're in a very bad position. You think, maybe I should not have done that. Maybe now the remorse is coming in. Now, meanwhile, you're staying in these camps. You're not able to get a job. You're not able to take care of your family. And what is so devastating to see for Princess Yasmine and I, what was so difficult to see, was the young men that would come to you privately and say, I took my family out. I took my young children out for a better future. And I feel like I cannot provide anything for them. The depersonalization that happens in these camps, they're robbed of everything, and the shame and the guilt that's attached to it. Now, when this goes on for a period of time, you see a very frightful, a quite scary clinical syndrome that is called the resignation syndrome, that we see this generally with refugees, or we see it sometimes with cases of concentration, where the person in question has given up on all possible hope and they have resigned. Nothing else matters. They know they cannot do this anymore. They've left the country for 5 years. They're living in these camps. They were supposed to be able to become legal. They're not able to change their status. Continuously, whatever they do, they hit a block. They cannot move forward. So this, there's a coma-like state. It's an emotional coma in which you're not doing anything. You're not moving anymore because nothing really matters. It's a very strong. It's stronger than a sense of helplessness. It's a proven sense of helplessness.
It's a complete and utter loss of hope.
Yes, it is. It is. That's so. You're going back to your question, which I guess it took me a long time to answer, is the resignation syndrome, the complete, as you mentioned, loss of hope, that nothing matters anymore.
And
I am
oh, sorry.
dependent. I am dependent on everything and everyone, and I am not able to provide for my family. I'm not able to take care of my child. I am a nothing.
And obviously we all know that they are everything. And what I really enjoyed and loved about the documentary is the part that I included in tonight's episode, is the part that you say, we do see you, we do hear you, and you know you are you know your presence is important to us, and they're beautiful human beings, that they deserve the opportunity to live a safe life and the opportunity that everybody else does, and that is to be able to provide for their family and to be proud of that, you know. And so the hope is not lost for overall, and we hope that through conversations like this, through your efforts and what we're about to announce in the remaining part of the episode, that we all can come together and wrap our arms around these individuals, so that they also see the hope that exists, and that they have the energy to continue to move forward and get themselves out of the situation that they're in. Awesome, people. I appreciate you watching this segment. To watch the full video, which you should, please click up here. And then if you want to join our text community, the number is right about here. And even though you don't need no reminders and you've heard it a billion times, if you like the video, subscribe, hit the little ring of ding-a-ding-ding bell so you can be notified for our next video. Thank you so much and appreciate you watching. Awesome, people.